connected to both the NIH and the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. Republicans wanted to know why American tax dollars supported coronavirus experiments in China and why oversight was so weak. There's this thing called gain of function. Essentially, you're testing things for ultimately human experimentation. In May of 2021, Fauci told the Senate that the NIH had never funded gain of function research at the Wuhan laboratory. Gain of function basically is a broad term for experiments that give a virus new or enhanced traits, subsequently to be used on humans. Republicans point to National Institute of Health funded Wuhan experiments that altered bat coronaviruses and produced viruses with different characteristics. Fauci and the NIH relied on a narrower regulatory definition, according to reports. Republicans accused Fauci of using that narrow definition to give Congress a misleading answer about what taxpayers were actually funding. And so they want to know the whole truth. Did Fauci tell Congress the whole truth or hide behind semantics? COVID's origin. Republicans say Fauci publicly discounted a possible laboratory origin while privately treating it as a serious possibility. Early emails in Fauci's diary, the man kept a diary, ladies and gentlemen, the man kept a diary. Man, 85 years old. At the time, he was in his 80s. He was keeping a diary. Grown-ass man in his 80s keeping a diary. I wonder why, but that's neither here nor there. Early emails in Fauci's diary show that scientists discussed both natural and laboratory-related explanations. Republicans are focused on Fauci's involvement in the discussions preceding the scientific paper known as proximal origin. That paper argued that the virus was not laboratory engineered. So Republicans want to know whether Fauci helped steer scientists toward that conclusion and why the uncertainty expressed privately was not clearly communicated publicly. But the biggest incrimination is Fauci's diary, because the Republicans got a hold of it. They got a hold of the man's diary. And by the way, just so we know, let me pause with my diatribe on my monologue here by saying this. Ladies and gentlemen, the day has ended where we got to get over this notion of things being deleted. Nothing's deleted. You can try to delete it all you want to. Whether it's the FBI or anybody or any other internal administration representing the United States of America, technology is so advanced, nothing dies anymore.
Welcome to Ace.HonestTakes. I'm your host Ace, and today, of course, this kind of slightly affect all of us in a sense. If you went through COVID-19 with Dr. Fauci and all his reporting and so on and so forth, and getting the vaccine, getting the booster shot, getting all these other kind of things like that, right? When it first initially happened, everyone talked about, hey, we got to go get the shot. We got to go get the shot, and they created that shot, if I'm not mistaken, but within like 8 to 12 months a year, right? If you know anything about getting shots, any kind of shot, it takes years and years and years, up to 10 plus years or more, according by what the actual shot is, right? And so I knew from the beginning this was some bull. I saw it. I'm like, nah, this some bull. But of course, just like everything else, it's propaganda. It's one of those things where, they're trying to rush you to go get something done. And honestly, it ain't no telling when we really gonna see the effects of what happened with these shots that people were taking. If you guys ever seen this movie called what's it called, Contagion, I think that's what it's called. I'm actually show of what it looked like. If you guys ever seen this movie called Contagion, go check that out. That's exactly what they wanted this to be, but come to find out that this is not what it really was. And so that's where we're talking about right now with Dr. Fauci, and with him actually getting off. He literally got off. You know what I'm saying? Because the Democrats ended up just going ahead and just giving him an opportunity to just get out of the way. And now Republicans, they are trying to get their flesh from him right now. And that's what Stephen A is talking about. So let's keep going.
That's just a lesson for all of us to know. Stuff don't die. If they want to get a hold of something, they're going to get a hold of something. You can book it. But back to Dr. Fauci's diary. It shows his private record differed from his public stories. Fauci later said, "I didn't recommend locking anything down." But here's what his diary says, according to the Republicans. He convinced New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio at the time to close schools. Ladies and gentlemen, I was in New York. I'll be damned if that wasn't true. That's true. That's true right there. It says here in his diary, he recommended closing bars and restaurants. We've heard Fauci himself talk about that, so we know that's true. It says here he advised de Blasio to proceed with shelter-in-place plans. It says here he supported extending federal restrictions from 15 to 30 days. And here's the biggest one, too. Later supported a proposed shutdown in Los Angeles, California. We damn sure know that was true. Republicans say the diary directly contradicts Fauci's denial. The diary also revealed a previously undisclosed medical episode. Fauci received his second Moderna vaccination on January 19, 2021. Yet, approximately 5 months later, after experiencing sudden chest pains, he had a CT scan. Doctors initially feared lung cancer. Further examination reportedly identified a pulmonary infarction, damage to the lung tissue generally associated with interrupted blood flow. So here's what Republicans wanted to know. Was the episode investigated as a possible vaccine-related event? Was it reported through the government's vaccine safety system? Did Fauci discuss it with NIH officials? And why did the public learn about it only through his diary, but not himself? While he was telling everybody else to take the vaccine and to take the booster shots. Emails and federal records previously denied deleting official records. That is Fauci. Rand Paul later released emails in which Fauci told colleagues to delete particular messages after reading them. And all
Man, this sounds like a scandal for the ages right here, man. This was a scandal, I feel like, because it had to do with the entire world. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody was on some kind of restriction, either one way or another. You know what I'm saying? Everything was shut down, like he just said. People couldn't go nowhere. People couldn't, move around. You couldn't be around your loved ones. Everybody had to FaceTime and so on and so forth, and talk to family members. But to think that all of the things that was told to us, quote unquote, that you got to be 6 feet apart and all the things that we needed to do at that point in time, when COVID first happened, come to find out was false. It's kind of disheartening, and it actually makes everything in the government look even more corrupt for me. I don't know how you feel, but that's just my personal opinion. But let's let them keep going.
a while this was happening, yesterday, we only saw Republicans getting at Dr. Fauci. The Democrats, number crickets. Outside of Senator John Fetterman, who they say really not a Democrat. I'm not getting into all of that. Here's what I do know. When you talk about Democratic officials and how them and their allies made Fauci practically untouchable, are we going to deny that was true? Are we going to deny that was true? Because I'm here to tell you, I'll be damned if it wasn't. Well, I'll explain that part a little bit later on in the show. For now, it's time to get to our next guest. He's a senator representing the great state of Kentucky. He's been on this show before, and he's back here again right now. Please welcome Senator Rand Paul to the show, who has been an incessant critic of Dr. Anthony Fauci throughout this whole coronavirus pandemic ordeal. He has not shied away from calling Rand Paul to the carpet. Is a doctor by profession, by the way, not just a senator. Let's welcome Senator Rand Paul to the show. Hello, sir. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Glad to be with you.
Put into perspective what transpired yesterday with this hearing involving Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was subpoenaed. He did show up, but he took the fifth. He pled the Fifth Amendment 111 times. Number one, did you expect that? And if so, why?
We weren't certain. We thought it might happen, but I didn't know until that moment that he wasn't going to testify. I really did want him to testify and still want some questions to be answered. The most important question is, should the taxpayer fund research where we take an animal virus and mutate it to become a human virus? We basically create a new virus that doesn't exist in nature, and we have the ability to do it. Scientifically, we can replace gene by gene. In 2010, they took the bird flu and they replaced 8 genes, but they made it transmissible through the air, aerosolized it between mammals, and it wasn't before. I think it makes no sense. The bird flu is about 50% deadly. If you make it more transmissible to humans, like what we think happened with COVID-19, it would be a death wish for the world. I mean, it spreads very rapidly, respiratory virus, very deadly. But the reason while we don't have a pandemic right now with the bird flu, is it doesn't go human to human. We think COVID-19 started out going human to human so quickly is because it was modified in the lab. It was pre-adapted to go human to human. And they do this interestingly with mice that have human lungs. I know that sounds kind of science fiction, but they've created mice that are basically human. When the virus looks at the lung cells, they are human. And they just culture this thing over and over. It's called serial passage until they get a virus that can infect humans. And it's a terrible thing. And Fauci knew all along what they were doing. In his private notes, he says, we suspect they might have manipulated because we know they do gain of function research. He says this in private, but then in public he says, oh, it came from nature, and that if you think otherwise, you're a conspiracy theorist. So I wish he had answered the questions.
Do you guys hear how crazy that sounds? How scary that sounds? Like they out here just making up all kind of viruses, doing all kind of things, and we as the general public don't know nothing about a lot of these things, and it's actually affecting us. Like that is scary. That's biological warfare, like at its greatest, basically in a sense, right? Like this stuff is really, really, really scary out here just to still be living. We all gotta thank God or whoever your higher power is, right? Because a lot of people actually did not make it through COVID-19 and a lot of these other things that, like during that time with COVID-19 and everything. Like I had an uncle, he was in the hospital for months. And luckily for us, he made it out. But a lot of other people, family members, might be yours, might be a friend of yours, might be somebody that you might know, did not. So this is scary, man. This is really scary.
He has served, Dr. Fauci, we're talking about here. He's been, in a lot of people's eyes, he's a career civil servant who spent 38 years at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. They think about his years of service, and yet at the age of 85, having retired, he's on Capitol Hill, and it seemed as if you had politicians up there who wanted him in jail. And he has said he has called your pursuit of him an unhinged obsession, and that you want him in jail. Speak to that for a second, and whether or not what your feelings are about him at this particular moment in time, and what they have been since the pandemic took place years ago, so everybody will understand.
My questions, I think, have all been very serious. 1 million Americans died. About 15 million people died worldwide. Where did this come from? What is the evidence for the lab? What is the evidence for it coming from the wet market? So the other thing we learned recently from their investigation that I led was that in January of 2020, at the very beginning, he was told that the earliest cases did not come from the wet market. He acknowledges it, and he says that the wet market was likely a super spreader. It didn't originate there, wasn't from the wild animals at the wet market. That was a super spreader event. So he knew this in January of 2020. But you've seen him on the media. For the last 5 years, he continues to say it came from the wet market. It came from the wet market. The wet market's the problem. We need to ban and close the wet market. Why? Now, if he were just a disinterested scientist that didn't have anything to gain, you'd say, well, he's just being honest. That's his opinion. Why condemn him? But what if you also know that he funded the lab that it came from? Would he have a self-interest in protecting himself by arguing it came from nature?
Right.
So he's not a disinterested observer. He's not an objective person. He's a person who, if it came from the lab, would share responsibility. So he had every reason to hide and cover up. And that's why his statements in private are diametrically opposite of his statements in public.
Man, that's a lot to take in, y'all. I'm gonna tell you the truth. Yeah, that's crazy. This is really, really, really tough. Hard pill to swallow and everything else. But So where are we living in right now? If y'all want to catch the whole entire interview, I will put it down, the link in the description as well. To go check it out. Stephen A. Smith. I think it's like an hour long, but this is really interesting. Not only interesting, but this is actually really, really terrifying and scary for everybody, because who knows when the next COVID-19 outbreak might happen. You know what I'm saying? So once again, hey, this is my honest take. I'm your host, Ace. I'm out. Peace.